Hey folks, Dave here, and I like knives. Here today to talk to you about the Kershaw Dividend. This is a video that is long overdue. We're going to talk about some of the nastiness around the place. To address the lighting, it's a beautiful day outside, so I have my blinds open, and it's a weird angle. Deal with it. This is certainly an interesting piece. We're going to spend a lot of time going over the gold as well as the garbage, because there is a little bit. But before that, how big actually is this? Kershaw Dividend here pictured between the Ontario Rat number 2 and number 1. I'm going to address this pretty soon so I can get this stuff off. Dividend between the Spyderco Delica and Endura. I'm going to address this pretty soon, so I can go ahead and get that off. Kershaw Dividend between the Spyderco Para 3 and Paramilitary 2. I'm going to address that. Dividend between the Benchmade Mini Grip and full-size Griptilian. This one is an interesting comparison for me because these are kind of the class that I always think about the Dividend living in. It was released, this is the link with the FRN handles. These two were released together. The bare knuckle was released after the fact a couple of years later. But just based on the blade shape, I've always thought of the bare knuckle, just my own headcanon, as kind of the larger in size Dividend. The Link certainly does seem to be sold and kind of sized as the big brother for the Dividend. So where a Dividend is more of a classic EDC, thin and slicey, the Link, still decent. I'm going to talk about this at some point, not this version of it, but still holds a lot of those points. Just a little bit thicker, a little bit beefier, a little bit more of a hard work tool. But a lot of what I say, especially in terms of variety, a lot of what I say for the Dividend does apply to the Link, just because as far as Kershaw corporate goes, these two do feel like they are linked and of a family. Dividend here pictured with a Dividend and a Dividend, because I love the Dividend, so I have lots of dividends. As you can see with those last few examples, the size on this is wonderful. Now, right at 3 inches. So if you measure from that corner, from that little protrudence, it is like 2.9 inches. If you measure from down here in the sharpening choil, it's not sharpening choil, but if you measure from down here in the flipper choil, that's 3.1 inches. If you measure straight up from the heel of the blade, it's 3.0. Be very careful where it is that you carry this. Legal issues might apply because it is spring assisted, so just know that. But as it stands, that's not a concern anywhere near where I live. This is kind of a classic office knife. It is super small, it is thin, it is incredibly slicey thin. Even like in the pocket, it is incredibly small. Putting it up beside kind of one of the classics in this point, handle length is almost exactly as long as the Delica. Handle width, or at least in the pocket width, is more narrow than the Delica and actually provides a little bit more blade length. Combine the incredibly thin stock with this nice hollow grind, and what you have is something that even after the edge goes, even after this stops being technically sharp, just the way that this thing is ground, the geometry behind it, this thing will continue cutting even after it's no longer shaving hair, and that's wonderful. I referenced the spring assist a little bit earlier, and that's going to be a negative for a lot of people. It kind of is for me, but for a lot of people, obviously, some people do appreciate the consistency that spring provides. I'm going to talk about part of why I don't like it a little bit later. Moving on from that, the flipper tab is done just about perfectly. You can see that there's a little bit of a scoop, a little bit of jimping, but it is so shallow and so rounded that there is no real way of it to hurt your finger and nothing negative for you to land on. All huge positives. Speaking of where your thumb lands back here on the backspacer, I just appreciate just Kershaw when they throw in a little bit of design just to show that, it's not a straight block of plastic that they're putting in here. It's a part of design. And It doesn't super matter, but I appreciate, having little harmonica holes. Important on a liner lock, and something that so many knives get very wrong, is access to the lock bar. It's actually why I'm not a huge fan, generally speaking, of liner locks, is because it's difficult to get that right consistently, apparently. That's not a problem here. You can see right there, there's not a massive cutout. I would have made it bigger, because of course I would have. But there's a little bit of a cutout, certainly enough for you to be able to get in, unlock it, and get to it. Now, importantly, this handle is so desperately thin that that cutout is required for you to be able to get your thumb in. You would not be able to otherwise, just because it's so thin. But again, Kershaw sees a need, fills the need. I appreciate that. I have a well-established history of appreciating solid names. Dividend, you're a good name. More importantly, though, is the number here. The link and the Dividend both are of the bare knuckle. Kershaw has a lot of American-made knives, a little bit heavier, a little bit better quality, a little bit better materials. And they've recently, not recently, but they've started tagging the scales with the American flag. Some of them, depending on the generation. There was a knife that I talked about recently. I can't remember what it was. Somebody in the comments corrected me, and I can't remember what video it was. But thank you for correcting me. I always encourage people to correct me. But anyway, there was, I think it was a 0 tolerance. It might have been the 0550. Anyway, so some generations have it here. Some generations have it on the pocket clip. In any case, what I'm talking about is over here. The model number is the 1812, while the Lynx is the 1776. References to history, always fun for me. The part about the Capitol getting burned down is odd choice of a knife, but if you're going for wars fought on American soil, I guess. Having the model number 1860 in gray would have a slightly different ring to it, I think. The pivot here is done correctly. You can see here that hexagon, no, focus, that hexagon is in a hexagon bolt, which means that this screw will not unscrew. This is a captured pivot. This is the correct way to do it. There are 3 ways to design a pivot. Two of them are correct. This is the best way. Thank you for doing this way. The materials here, aluminum handles, 420 HC blade material. That's why a little bit of that. Again, we're going to talk about that later. But all of that is good to go, certainly for the price. And on top of that, the price being $30-ish. I forgot what this one is. It's here is where it is. But on top of that, this, until recently, might still be, I forgot, it's one of the cheapest ways to get into M390. This is a blade in, there we go. This is a blade in M390, and this and the Link are both $70-ish. It's the cheapest way, as far as what I'm aware, to get into that higher level steel. As well as there's, I believe, S30 versions. House of Blades for the Link has S35. There was an LMAX version at some point, I'm pretty sure. This, my point is a variety of different colors, incredible. There's a more budget option for 20-something. I'll put that here as well, with the FRN handles, which is what the Link is in. But there's a ton of these out on the market, and it feels like every different place has their own exclusive. I know the Link was released in 20CV. I think this one was as well. My point is there are a bunch of these. Whatever flavor you want, steel or color, you can go find. Pocket clip's gonna be my last good for the moment. 4-position, up, down, left, right, as well as just your standard 2-screw pocket clip, which you can switch around to really whatever you want it on. One of the exclusives I forgot to explain, this is a Walmart exclusive. I picked it up because it's the tannish and the blackish, and this is correct scientifically, the sexiest version of the Dividend. I hate that it's a Walmart exclusive. However, they got a good exclusive. Still 420 HC, but man, is it good looking. That was the gold. This is the garbage. Spring assist is not for everybody. It's not my favorite thing. Figure it out yourself. If you like it, then you like it. If you don't, I have never tried to take the spring out of this. I suspect I will have to. I'll get to that in a minute. The body screws going through that beautiful, beautiful back spacer don't go, well, they do go all the way, but they are not Chicago style, so they are just straight screwed. There's also 3 of them, which feels like too many, or certainly more than you need. But you can see here that they're not Chicago style, being that these are not 2 screws screwing into each other, it's 1 screw going all the way through. What that means is that if there's any kind of damage, it's not great. You could damage your whole knife. Not a huge deal, but for somebody who disassembles stuff, it just increases the chance, I believe, increases the chance of something going wrong, and I'm not a fan of that. I didn't really mention this up top, but in the hand ergonomically, this thing's solid. Little bit of a swell there, a little bit of a swell here. Fits really nice. I have, 6-inch hands? Full finger grip. The last part of the negative is I just have written down that it's rusty, and that's because this is 420HC that I used as my go-to kitchen knife, because I didn't want to get my nice one dirty, which is a very stupid reason. But part of the joy of marrying somebody who's better prepared for life than you are is that they come fully equipped with a full set of kitchen knives. When you're just on your own, living in an old decrepit house that falls apart around you where you don't have heat or air conditioning, means that you kind of have to, or a functional stove or oven, it was a rough place, fun times, is that you kind of have to make things up as you go along. This, and this, I'm excited to talk about this one day, was my go-to kitchen knife. And in that service, and in that job, it served extraordinarily well. It is so gosh darn thin and slicey. When you're just trying to cut up an onion, you don't care about action, you don't care about a detent, you just care about the blade deploying as quickly as possible and then being easy to put away and put back on the shelf. However, that spring comes with an added bit of failure, because as destroyed and nasty as the rest of this is, and you can see, well, you probably can't see, but I can see all kinds of crud down in there, I suspect that, as we saw with my Kalashnikov disassembly, the Boker, I suspect that the spring in here is all kinds of nasty, and that sucks. The spring adds a possibility of failure, because you can clean a blade, you can spray out with compressed air, you can spray out the interior here, but with a spring, if there's gunk that gets into the pivot, it's there to stay and can eat away at the spring. It's not great. That is part of why I don't super like spring-assisted knives. With that said, however, this is something where I would cut a thing, I'd cut your peppers, I'd cut your onions, and then fold it away and put it back on the shelf. Wipe it off on my pants and then put it on the shelf. This is not something that I kept well applied with frog lube or whatever other kind of rust prevention. I'm not sure if frog lube specifically is food safe. Only use food safe stuff. Don't poison yourself on my account, please. So, what I'm saying is that this is not specifically the fault of the knife. However, when you're dealing with 420HC specifically, it is something to keep in mind. You need to stay on top of just keeping it dealt with, keeping it clean, keeping it applied, wiped, dried, etc. Had I used my M390 knife in this roll, it would not have been nearly as big a deal. Although the spring, I assume, is made out of the same material, and thus the spring specifically would absolutely have the same issues. That's why I don't like springs. Here at the end of the video, what I am holding in my hands is a knife that is one of my most heavily used. Of all of my hundreds by this point, this is the knife that I most appreciate, because this is the knife that cooked my dinner. It cut my sausage, it prepared my lunch, it sliced my apples. This is the knife that got me through that stage of life because I was too cheap to actually buy kitchen knives. And for that, I will be infinitely endeared to this model. It's a knife that I liked anyway. I appreciated before because it is so stupid slicey, because it is so thin and hollow ground. That's why I used it as a kitchen knife, is because it was designed to be able to take that. I mean, what? I only had like 2 real points and one of them was a caveat. I'm not gonna, this is a great knife. This is a fantastic knife, especially with so many different versions of it. You really do have no excuse for having the same issues that I did. You can find your own. At the end of the day, the Kershaw Dividend is just, it's a fantastic knife. And it's kind of Kershaw's most knife, in a similar fashion to how in my Rat 1 video, I referred to this as the most quintessential knife. When you think of a knife, this is what you're thinking of. It's a basic option. It's just the quick and easy. There's no fancy locks or designs or whatever. It's just a knife. I believe that the Dividend is Kershaw's version of that. This is possibly the most basic knife I can, well, other than the Rat, this is possibly the most basic knife I can think of. And it's incredible. You take a simple concept, you nail the execution, and what you have is just a really good knife. I like it. You should have one. If only so that it gives you perspective on what a $30-ish knife is capable of. There are a lot of knives out here for $30 that are not worth much, but you have to, it's a budget knife. No. Shut up. I'm talking about this thing. Quality issues. It's a Kershaw Dividend. It's solid. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions, if this was helpful in any way or for whatever reason, let me know down below. If you have lived in a truly crap situation and had to kind of improvise with your utilities, let me know. Sleeping in multiple hoodies was fun. And in any case, you have a great day.